Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Knockout Podcast, episode 53. I'm Ben, and as ever, I'm joined by Jack. Was just saying before we came on, we were just chatting. A quiet week, nothing too much to discuss, but 5 minutes before we go on, the headline runs: Frank Dupuis, Venom CEO, accused of racism and terrorizing employees. Venom being the new kit provider of the UFC, so same old in the world of UFC. But Jack, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing not too bad. That is kind of classic MMA. So Venom, I think the CEO will fit right in.
Really
lovely to hear.
Building a great ethos and
yeah, I feel like
these views.
He's probably just embracing the culture. He was probably fine before he signed the deal with the UFC, and then he was like, right, I've got to fit in. So bit of racism, bit of employee abuse.
Might be sort of like page 3 on the job requirements.
Just
like bad history with sexism, toxic work environment. Just a bit of the usual. But moving on to stuff that could potentially get us sued. Of course, we should probably say that's all alleged.
Obviously,
Pub Radio, it's fine. But yeah, we've not got any fights to talk about. That happened last week. UFC took one of their very rare breaks, but we have got a few fights. I mean, there were some Bellator fights, I should say, but nothing particularly. I saw actually today a road tangent. Michael Venom Page, despite fighting absolutely no one, is the number 1 ranked welterweight contender in Bellator, which just
Bellator is like
bizarre.
Bellator is kind of a joke, despite being it's either Bellator or one of the biggest, the second biggest promotion. But Bellator are basically a joke. They are ridiculous. They've got like a handful of good fighters, and they just feed people like absolute nobodies to build a name. Venom Page probably the worst. It's got the kind of most favorable treatment in that regard, but it's a weird one. Patricio Pitbull's good. The good Pitbull brother. He would be a legitimately. I think he'd be good in the featherweight division. I think he'd be top 5 probably. I think Holloway and Volkanovski would do him quite badly, but outside of that, I think he's a very fun fight for everyone else. And I'd still like to see the Volkanovski or Holloway fights if they could do a cross promotion, which I know he's been talking about, but I doubt it happens.
That is probably more total airtime that we've given to Bellator in the sort of 52 episodes prior.
So. It really is, yeah.
We'll end it there.
We know. Well, I'd say that. I mean, it'd be interesting the Holloway fight specifically because the Volkanovski Ortega fight got pushed back, didn't it? So, what do we do with Max Holloway kind of in the meantime? He was clearly, many people thought he won the second Volkanovski fight. He's just nearly murdered Calvin Kattar. You need to do something with him. Let him go and I'd say that would be a good fun thing to do. I'd almost no chance it happens, but I'd want it to. But there we go. That's just
I think he's
now. We'll stop with Bellator.
I think he's got a fight lined up, Pitbull, or at least there was a square off against. I think it's AJ McKee. I think who got that crazy submission at the end of the year. But
he's the number 1 contender, I think. But
we will see. Maybe in a few fights' time, he makes a sort of Michael Chandler-esque move over, and they never refer to Bellator. But who knows?
We don't normally.
Yeah, exactly. very much towing the company line. But we will return to the UFC. There's not a whole lot to talk about for this fight week coming up, but we thought we'd give a few quick thoughts, regardless on some of the aspects. I mean, in terms of the prelims, Jack Shaw is Welsh, I think undefeated, or at least hasn't lost in the UFC. He fights Hunter Azor. Who else there? Jim Miller, Joe Solecki headlines the prelims. That could be quite fun. What else? I mean, Jorgen De Castro. There's really not a lot. I mean,
we're clutching at straws when we're saying Jorgen De Castro.
I mean, Jorgen De Castro is a name who is pretty rubbish. But I mean, Jack Shaw's a bit of interest. I mean, on the main card is really where the interest lies. Mike Perry, Daniel Rodriguez, Mike Perry, who we were briefly talking about getting pieced up by Tim Means in his last fight. I think he, in fact, said he couldn't be bothered with the weight cut and is now going to move up to middleweight after this fight, which is.
I mean, he did miss weight by 5.5, or 4.5 pounds, I suppose. 171 is the limit. But yeah, he weighed in at 175.5 for a welterweight fight. So yeah, it makes sense that he just can't be asked cutting the weight. We'll see how he weighs in this time. But Mike Perry is a man that is not holding things together particularly well at the minute, is how I'd describe him.
Yeah. No, especially in that last weight cut, I seem to remember him sort of flaunting eating junk food and then missing the weight and complaining that he couldn't make the weight anymore. And I'm like, well, might want to stop with the traditional fight week preparations with not going to McDonald's. But well, who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I to advise? Nina Antonov, Mackenzie Dern above that. The battle of the mothers, really, the motherhood derby.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Dern, who, well, essentially since giving birth, has really gone on an impressive run. Seems to have got her weight cutting issues under control a bit more. I think for her last fight, she was saying that she was like walking into fight week weighing 126, so literally on the limit. So seems to have the weight cuts all under control. Seems to be making big improvements with her boxing.
It's a straw weight, so she's still got a little bit to cut there.
Oh, is it? Maybe
126, yeah. Maybe it was 116. I can't remember. I don't.
But well, regardless, it was
certainly got it under control.
Yes, it was not a big cut. Improved her striking, especially since that Amanda Ribas loss. I think she's working with Perillo.
Perillo, yeah, she's working with Perillo. And in her last fight against Jandra Dober, she looked interesting. It was like, I think the way, from what I remember, it was like she had good ideas. Like, it's still like obviously not there kind of technically or mechanically, but like she had fairly decent ideas on the feet, which is like when it's a fairly raw talent, which she still kind of is in terms of MMA, that's probably what you want more than necessarily like good mechanics, because they can develop just more and more over time, but you want like the fighter's striking brain to be there. I feel like early on that's more important, even though she's not necessarily that early on in her career, but I think she can still develop the mechanics, whereas the kind of brain, the brain for the striking comes a bit harder for some people. So encouraging is what I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, for Nina Antonov, this is a bizarre one. I was actually just looking up while she's talking there. Her last fight, I mean, her last fight against Tatiana Suarez ended a 4-fight winning streak, which actually had wins over Angela Hill, Randa Marcos, and Claudia Gadelha. Lost to Tatiana Suarez, who I don't know whether she's dropped off the face of the earth, but
yeah,
Nina Antonov has gone away, had a baby, and is now coming back to fight before Tatiana Suarez.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. It's like, that's crazy. She's had a baby and is still back before Suarez, so that's crazy. But yeah, and she actually did really well in the Suarez fight, although Suarez did hurt her neck, which is why I think she's been out for so long.
Yeah,
she had a big problem with her neck. But yeah, she won the last round, and if that was a 5-round fight, say, there's a very good possibility that Nina Antonov wins that fight. So very encouraging from Nina Antonov. She'd probably put in the strongest performance against Suarez. Off the top of my head, I'd say definitely did. So yeah, very encouraging. And she looked very good in that run, much improved, and seen as kind of like what post-baby Mackenzie Dern's looked like, being much improved. If post-baby Nina Antonov can do that, then we might have a good little title run on our hands here. Yeah,
it'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see, how Antonov comes back off that layoff. How, especially in a 3-round fight, got to get going early, and she's not got potentially too much time to just shake off the ring rust or the octagon rust, whatever the correct phrase is. But yeah, I think that is well. If the co-main event wasn't on the card, I could see Antonov Mackenzie Dern being a sort of fight of the night contender. I think that'll probably go to the co-main event, which we'll get onto in a minute. But yeah, a fun fight, and certainly one that we can certainly look forward to seeing the developments of both of the fighters.
Yeah.
Sam Alvey, Julian Marquez. Not quite sure how Sam Alvey has managed to finesse his way up to a sort of third last on a card. Smiling Sam Alvey, I think the only person smiling during his fight is him.
He hasn't won a fight since 2018. How is the man still in the UFC?
Yeah, he's 0-1-4 in his last 5. I think actually, if I remember correctly, I think he was quite unlucky in his last fight. I think he probably should have won that, but I mean, you don't really need to say that. Hopefully, Julian Marquez, who put on quite a fun fight against Maki Bitolo, I think, in his sort of comeback fight after a 2-year, 3-year layoff even. That could be. Well, I was about to say a fun one, but I quickly stopped myself from saying that. Could be, good for Marquez. Hopefully, he can get a win, and hopefully, touch wood, that might be the last we see of old smiling Sam.
Oh, please.
But we'll move on to pastures more interesting. Arnold Allen, Sodiq Yusuff, the co-main. I think this has probably got all of the ingredients to be a sort of fight of the night. I wouldn't go as far as say lock in, because you never know what could happen, but two young, exciting featherweights. This is their first. Well, I was about to say first test. I think Sodiq Yusuff got his against Andre Fili, but certainly their first, clash against someone who's perhaps looking upwards in the division. What are your sort of initial thoughts on this matchup?
I don't really know. Like, it has been a while since we've seen both of them. They've both been out for over a year. I think they both fight on the. They didn't fight on the same card, did they? But they both fought in January of 2020.
Yeah,
so,
they both fought a week apart.
A week apart, yeah.
Sodiq Yusuff beat Andre Fili Jan 18th, 2020, and a week later, Arnold Allen getting a unanimous decision against Nick Lentz.
So these are both young fighters. They're both 27. So a year out at that point, they could we basically don't know how they might have developed in that time. I assume they're still. Alan trains in Canada, doesn't he? He's out of TriStar, so if he stayed there the whole time, he wouldn't have had to deal with probably English gyms closing. I don't know, but I assume that they're going to both come in with some new wrinkles to show. So it'll be interesting to see how that works up. Alan's a very kind of typical sort of TriStar guy, I'd say. He resembles in many ways in terms of his jab, like GSP, Rory McDonald. They like their fighters to kind of fight in that TriStar way. And then Sodiq Yusuff is kind of a big powerhouse, got a nice kicking game. But also against Fili, it kind of maybe just surprised me because I didn't know as much about him as I should have going into that fight, but he was a very solid grappler. And I think he does, I think he might be a black belt, and he was out of Lloyd Irvin's gym, who I think is actually a fairly grapple heavy gym. So kind of surprised me with that, to be honest, which maybe shouldn't have. But yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that kind of works out, because Alan does again, TriStar way, does like to kind of blend in the jab with double leg. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays up. And I expect to see them really kind of taking each other everywhere. Like, it will be a mixed martial arts fight. Obviously, but in the sense that they're both, I think, going to fancy themselves as both the better strikers and the better grappler. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, interesting. Actually, I was just looking up. We often are wary about using Wikipedia height, or in fact any measure of height statistics in the UFC. But it does. I sort of had in my mind that Arnold Allen was a slightly bigger fighter than Sodiq Yusuff, but Wikipedia suggesting perhaps that Sodiq Yusuff got an inch in reach. But yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that Allen might, say with that jab, I think especially in the Nick Lentz fight, kicked very well. I imagine he will probably want to keep this fight more range. I think you said, especially with the Sodiq Yusuff grappling in the Andre Fili fight and in his fight before that against Gabriel Benitez, showing the power he had sort of up close. I think he perhaps will be wanting to get this fight in a closer range, use that left hand that he has. It's got crazy amounts of power, and probably bring in some of that wrestling. But yeah, I think this has got all the ingredients of a really sort of fun, fast paced encounter against two really good prospects.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited about this one. Best fight on the card for my money, or most interested one, I think. So
yeah, I think probably both, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that goes. And then really it's the main event. Marvin Vettori versus Kevin Holland. I think our last podcast we talked a bit about Darren Till being pulled out, and I think at that point it looked like Kevin Holland was going to step in, although it hadn't been officially confirmed. It obviously has been now. Kevin Holland obviously fighting a couple of weeks ago against Derek Brunson in that, pretty drab and disappointing affair on his side. And Marvin Vettori coming off also a late notice step up against Jack Hermansson. I can't remember who Jack Hermansson was fighting, but I don't think it was scheduled to be Marvin Vettori.
I think he was scheduled to fight Till, actually. I think Till was pulled out of both of them.
So it was. I think it was Hermansson's original. Kevin Holland. Huh.
Was it?
It's supposed to be Hermansson Holland who tested positive for COVID. So Holland pulled out, and Vettori steps in, and now it's roles reversed. Holland stepping in at short notice to fight Vettori. Interesting that. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I feel like a lot of the narrative has been on Holland stepping in, and
sorry, just coming in with the late correct. Sorry, I was just checking that as well. He was scheduled. We were both right. He was scheduled to fight Till initially. Till pulled out due to an injury. Then he was scheduled to face Holland. Holland pulled out, and then he was faced Vettori. So he went through
some sort of love triangle going on here between these. They just cancel bouts all over the place.
Yeah, very strange. But no, because I swear I remember thinking.
Yeah, that does sound right, actually.
After the Hermansson fight, seeing how stumped Hermansson was by facing a southpaw, I remember thinking Till would have killed him. And I don't know why I would have thought that if he wasn't scheduled to fight Till. I suppose I could, but so he went through a whole rung of opponents there.
Bizarre. And as I was saying, I think a lot of it has probably been on Kevin Holland coming in on short notice, and as much as I don't know, I felt like after the Kevin Holland fight, after the Derek Brunson fight, I found myself saying, I think that is just Kevin Holland, and I don't think he's going to change. And to be honest, I think I probably still stand by that. I don't think Kevin Holland has got the necessary mindset or ability to make the changes that he needs to do. But one thing is for certain is that only taking a 2-week break will almost certainly give him no chance to at least implement the technical changes he needs. I mean, whether his mindset and his willingness to attack if he gets taken down or to be more disciplined changes, that remains to be seen. But from my point of view, I can't see a particularly different Kevin Holland rocking up than the one we saw against Derek Brunson. No,
and especially the kind of 2-3 week turnaround is very strange, considering when people make that kind of turnaround, normally it's they get a quick knockout and they then take the place of someone higher up the rankings. But this is Kevin Holland had a 5-round fight 3 weeks before this. I've got to think that'll play something. I don't see after a 5-round fight, I don't know how long fighters generally get back into full training, but I can't imagine it'd be straight away. So it'll be interesting to see how Holland looks. He's very a big possibility that he could be coming overtrained and he'll look a bit slow, a bit stiff. Although he's generally a fairly loose fighter.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is he's not a guy that. Well, he's a guy that after the Brunson fight talked about going down to welterweight. So I think definitely the short notice could perhaps affect him in the later rounds. He didn't exactly get damaged in the Brunson fight, but he
not
says
big, but like enough. Like he took shots. He was eating some, like, from what I remember, not like the nicest of elbows on the ground from Brunson. So like he was never really close to being finished or anything, but still, it's like it is damage that takes a little bit to heal up, to get your body back to 100%. And I don't know if he'll be at that.
Yeah, for sure. No, certainly. I was also going to say that he's probably not going to deal with a weight cut, at least to a big extent, because he's quite a small guy at the weight anyway. But focusing on Vettori for a bit, I mean, he did have that win against Hermansson, which was a good win, stepping in on late notice and really sort of catapulted him up into the sort of top rung of middleweight talent. I was reading reading an article this week, and I was sort of thinking back to our discussion of the Hermansson fight, and someone described Vettori's striking as sort of meat and potatoes, which I think resonated very well. It might have been you, I can't remember. It was someone who said it. It might have been on the Hermansson sort of, well, in our review podcast after that. But he is a very, everything's fit and proper, everything's neat and tucked, but nothing particularly exciting. It is just sort of like, here's the left hand, here's the left hand, here's a 1-2, here's a 1-2.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's very physical as well. I think that's another thing he did. Like, he is like a fairly like decently sized guy at the weight. Like, he's a physical fighter overall, and having seen like some or a few interviews with him, some of the things he says, he's not necessarily the brightest spark. So I think that kind of being that physical kind of like guy that really kind of makes you feel his presence in there, a bit more of a bully as opposed to like a technical or smart fighter with like clever setups. Like, that's just kind of how he is. So I think that can work well against someone like Holland, I think, who will try a lot of things, even if they're not necessarily always the smartest things to try. Kevin Holland will come out there with a few wacky ideas. And I think someone that can kind of like maintain, kind of like stay measured in a way that kind of was. It's interesting with Vettori because he gets very angry, but he still manages to maintain kind of discipline to a degree. In terms of like, he doesn't go out there and ever really deviate from that kind of the basics, the fundamentals. Even if he gets wound up, which he does quite often. So I think that can work well against Holland. And yeah, given like everything kind of like with Holland, as I said, like possibly being overtrained or still carrying a bit of damage, I think Vettori is who I'd be favouring by a decent margin. But it'd be interesting because Holland is dangerous, and if he can like use his length and kind of try and just stay on the outside, really don't engage in the wrestling at all, even though Vettori isn't like a huge takedown threat, but he does have that like in his bag, then I think Holland can have some success, but I don't know if he can carry it on for 5 rounds.
The thing is, it feels like exactly the same sort of things that we were saying in our Holland Brunson preview. Use your range, don't overextend yourself, don't get greedy, use your natural advantage. I think his height and his length in terms of reach advantages are even bigger in this fight. But all I've got to go off is the fact that he failed to do any of that in any of his fights so far, most recently 2 weeks ago, and I don't see how he's going to turn the corner. And if he does, then that's certainly something that I'm not going to expect. If it happens, fine, that's a really good thing, and we can then maybe begin to reevaluate Kevin Holland if he continues to do that. But based on his character, based on the performance he put in 2 weeks ago, I've no reason to believe that change in attitude and sort of game plan is going to be forthcoming against Vettori.
Yeah, and similar things to like what he did against Brunson. Brunson was able to get a lot of his takedowns because Holland really kind of like falls in, or like after he throws his right hand, he kind of gets over his feet and then doesn't stay mobile enough to be able to throw the right hand and then get out. He really like commits to that right hand and follows through on it, and falls in to the clinch generally. So there are opportunities, I think, for Vettori there to kind of take advantage of that, get it in the clinch, kind of, and then like use his physical presence, as I said he likes to do. So kind of like with all those things considered, I think this should really be Vettori's fight to lose, probably. And as we've seen against Hermansson, like he's got decent cardio for 5 rounds, so at least like he can keep up that pace, like a decent pace for 5 rounds. So I expect Vettori to be able to take this, to be honest.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But yeah, I think those that sort of methodical, reasoned approach from Vettori, similar to Brunson in that same way, in terms of they're quite happy to sort of stick to their game plan, will serve him well against a Kevin Holland who doesn't really like to do any of that. But that's really it for the card. The only other thing that was announced that I guess we can briefly touch on is Poirier McGregor 3, which was announced in the week, I think to take place at 264, or I can't remember when, but in a couple of months. Any initial thoughts? I mean, I think we both predicted McGregor to get the job done quite early, which is predicted to get him done. You know, we perhaps thought that Poirier was taking quite a lot of damage in his last few fights, but you know that fight obviously went differently. Have you sort of swayed your opinion sort of more towards Poirier, or do you still fancy McGregor to get it done in the third time?
Yeah, I think we were both, from what I remember, fairly torn on the like Poirier fight. We knew that Dustin had obviously massively improved. But yeah, I think it was more a fact that Dustin's kind of like chin generally and just overall toughness did kind of surprise me a little bit. He's been in some like fairly brutal wars recently, like the Hooker fight, the Holloway fight. Like I would have expected that would take a toll on his chin. But he fairly confidently ate McGregor's shots. And like I think he said he was hurt at one point, but he wasn't, like, he never really looked particularly wobbly. Like he ate shots, but he was okay with them. So, and there's no real reason to believe that he can't do that again. So I don't think it'll be necessarily a factor of the chin. So given that, it'll be interesting to see how McGregor approaches it, see kind of like what he changes up. I think that if he's overly focused on it was just the leg kicks that went wrong, or another thing he even said like earlier, which was really stupid. He said something like, "Oh, Dustin was a coward for like shooting the takedown early on," or something like that. Like if he's just focused on, "Oh, it was the takedown, oh, it was the leg kick," I can see him going like back in there and getting boxed up in the pocket again, because Poirier's was countering him fairly consistently. Like his right hook was money for Poirier in that fight. And that really did as much work as the leg kicks, to be honest. So if Conor's too focused on, "Oh, it was the leg kicks, I just got out kicked," and not that he also got outboxed, I think it could be another rough night for McGregor. So I think there are a lot of questions still, but this time I would favour Poirier. I think that he can mix up his weapons in terms of his jab, his right hook, and the leg kicks enough to keep McGregor guessing. Even if the leg kicks aren't as available in this fight, I think he can at least feint them and then land punches from that. So early on, I think I'd favour McGregor. But again, that does feel like a lot of the times when you're picking fighters, it kind of can feel like, especially in a rematch, it can feel like a bit of a cop-out to say, "Oh, the fighter that won last time, they're going to win." So It does feel like a bit of a cop out, but I'm going to go with Poirier this time. But it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think we knew. We both said coming in that the leg kicks were going to be a key factor.
Yeah.
And I think something that, well, definitely surprised me, and I'm sure it surprised you, was the lack of game planning on McGregor's part to sort of try and negate that as best he could. I assume that's got to be an adjustment he'll make. So, and I'm sure conversely, Dustin is aware that McGregor will have made that adjustment. So it is sort of like a game of like cat and mouse in terms of, Poirier now knows that the leg kicks probably will still be an effective tool, but probably won't be as effective next time round. So I think it's a tight one. I'll probably have to see where I stand on it. I could see Poirier getting him out of there again. Interesting to see how Conor's chin recovers after that. It was a pretty nasty KO, and he is coming back quite soon. He did have that turnaround against Nate Diaz, but that was a submission, which is slightly different. So I could definitely see either way, and I think now I'm tossing up in my head. I think I probably will also lean towards Poirier, but that could change as we come to it, and we'll definitely discuss that more in depth when it comes nearer to the time. And I think it was UFC 264, 265 that it was scheduled to take place at.
Which isn't too long, I don't think.
No, it's only a couple of months, I think. Let me see if I can get an exact date on it. McGregor versus Poirier 3. It is, UFC 264, which is July 10th. So, just over 3 months away. So, which actually is a bit longer than I thought. I thought it might be late June, but that's quite a small turnaround when you think it was probably about 5 months since McGregor lost it, which is maybe a bit too quick of a turnaround after the knockout defeat. But we'll see, and as I say, we'll discuss that more in depth when it comes to it. But that's really all we've got to discuss today. A bit of a shorter episode, but unless you've got anything else to mention, Jack?
No, that I think covers everything.
Yeah, well, we'll be back maybe slightly earlier in the week. Next week we might be moving the podcast forward a few days just to sort of deal with a few work issues.
Changing work schedules.
This is not a full-time thing, and I'm not sure we'll ever get that, but we can dream. But yeah, we will be back to talk about everything from this card, and also to look forward to Whittaker Gastelum coming up next week. Not a whole lot of intrigue on this one as well in terms of big card. I'm just looking down at Drakkar Close, Jeremy Stephens. Could be an interesting one. Jeremy Stephens seemingly moving up to lightweight, but
interesting.
We'll get tucked in. We will tuck in to all of that next week. So thank you for listening, and until then, stay safe, and we'll see you then.
See ya.